Herodotus lived during the 5th century before the Common Era in ancient Greece. He wrote a narrative summarizing history as it was then known and describing many of the events of his own lifetime. Although direct discussion on his biases and epistemology is saved for the conclusion of the series, on this video you may learn details about a portion of his work. The first book, called Clio, Part 1 of 2, Introduction and the Fall of Croesus. Herodotus begins his work by describing the mythology of the conflicts between the West and East, between the Hellenes and the Eastern barbarians. He says that the well-known Persians allege that it all began with the Phoenicians. The first of the offenses, as the historian calls it, concerns yes, the same mythological figure that features in Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound. Unfortunately, her story is too vast, as there are too many alternate versions for me to retell. The historian merely mentions her in passing. It is fabled that she was taken by the Phoenicians, and that is how she ends up in Egypt, where she is transformed back from a cow into a human. The second offense was perpetrated by the Greeks, in part as a response to the former. A group of Greeks take some Phoenician princesses. Never mind the details. The significant consideration is that the rape, the stealing, of women is an element that repeats through many of the myth stories. The historian does not bother with as much detail as he seemingly could. Instead, he announces his methodology or intention, as he says,
"I shall go forward further with the story, giving an account of the cities of men, small as well as great. For those which in old times were great have for the most part become small, while those that were in my own time great used in former times to be small. So then, since I know that human prosperity never continues steadfast, I shall make mention of both indifferently."
This, of course, is most commendable and astute. It is important to keep in mind that a historian cannot be entirely certain as to what is of value, as one never knows what will ensue after the history is written. Now Herodotus gets into more verifiable history as he discusses the fate, the humbling fortune of Croesus. The historian credits him as being the first Easterner, though in my interpretation not a savage, barbarian, that subdues any Greek city. First, the genealogy that led to Croesus' rule is described. Apparently, a certain, far, descendant of Heracles is involved. The latter was named Candace. This man, being very proud of his wife's beauty, allowed his servant or companion to see his wife's naked body. This was supposed to be done in secret. The motivation behind such a deed is that
it happens that men's ears are less apt of belief than their eyes.
Obviously, though this notion is well known, there is an aphorism in here. Either way, the wife notices the ploy and chooses to punish her husband. Herodotus describes that the barbarians are humiliated by their own naked body. She tells the man who saw her naked that he must either kill Candace or die himself. Of course, the man kills the descendant of Heracles and assumes the throne. Curiously, and let this be the first show of Herodotus' religious style, though there might be an earlier example, the Oracle of Delphi announces that vengeance for the Heraclidae will come within 5 generations. The historian tells various stories or anecdotes that occur leading up to Croesus, the 5th generation. Among these stories is a mention of Periander. He was a then famous, but now little known, possibly enlightened, monarch of Corinth. Allow me to skip the details of the story. It is related or connects with a treatise by the historian-philosopher named Plutarch. I mention it to let you know that on this channel you may also learn about Plutarch's writings. After invading the Greek cities in Asia Minor, present-day Turkey, Croesus considers invading the Aegean Islands. Yet, Bias, the ancient wise man, convinced him against the endeavor. I should mention that at this time, all of the 7 wise men are featuring. This, of course, segues into a mention of Solon. This wise man arrives at Croesus' court after reforming the government of Athens and instituting the, at least, first steps towards democracy. Then, the most noteworthy and memorable of events ensue. After showing Solon all his wealth, luxury, comfort, and dominion, Croesus asked the wise man,
"Whether thou hast seen any whom thou deemest to be of all men the most happy?" But Solon, using no flattery but the truth only, said, "Yes, O king, Telos the Athenian."
Solon then explains that what makes Telos worthy of such a status is the fact that he died happy and with positive renown. Thus, Croesus asked, supposing still that he himself would be the answer, who would be happiest besides the previously mentioned man? Yet, to Croesus' frustration, Solon answered Cleobus and Biton. These men are from a sure myth, but Solon and Herodotus, and even Plutarch in another treatise, take them as true. They are the ones who, after being kind and helpful sons to their mother, the priestess of a temple to Hera, and their mother praying to the goddess for the greatest blessing, reward, possible to be granted to her helpful children, are granted a peaceful death. Yes, although young and healthy, they go to sleep never to wake up, proof that, alas, death is better than life. Croesus, of course, did not like any of this. Solon explains to him the dimensions of life, the length of life. This is something that truly must be thought or realized by all at some point in life. Of course, some might never realize it. The wise man then says,
"Man is altogether a creature of accident. Before he comes to his end, it is well to hold back and not to call him yet happy, but only fortunate. But we must of everything examine the end and how it will turn out at the last, for too many God shows but a glimpse of happiness and then plucks them up by the roots and overturns them."
As is well known, and I think Herodotus returns to it later, Solon leaves and eventually returns to Athens. In the meantime, Croesus has merely received a foreboding of his upcoming trials and misfortunes. First, Croesus dreams that one of his children will die young. Since his other child seems to have had some sort of mental deficiency, the king decides to remove his healthy child from all dangers. Yet, to make a long story short, despite his best efforts, his healthy child is killed in an accident. This is but the beginning of the monarch's misfortunes, as he becomes ambitious to, instead of invading Greece as previously mentioned, invade Persia, the then small and weak Persian kingdom. Croesus reaches this decision by misinterpreting the prophecy of the Oracle of Delphi. The oracle famously tells him that if he marches against the Persians, he will destroy a great empire. Croesus figures this means he will destroy the Persians. Alas, it meant he will destroy his own empire. LOL. The topic changes to how Pisistratus came to control Athens. This involved faking an injury from some unspecified enemies and thus obtaining permission to keep armed guards within the city's walls. The soon-to-be tyrant then used these guards to take over the Acropolis and declare himself king. Of course, this was but the first time he did such a thing, for he was soon after deposed, all to take power again. On the second occasion, says the historian, the tyrant applied
A device the most simple by far, as I think, that ever was practiced. Considering at least that it was devised at a time when the Hellenic race had been long marked off from the barbarian as more skillful and further removed from foolish simplicity, and among the Athenians who are accounted the first of the Hellenes in ability.
This jocular frustration or derision refers to the fact that Pisistratus dressed a tall, beautiful woman as Athena and had her ride with him in a chariot into the city, while companions alongside yelled that the goddess herself was bringing the man to rule Athens. The tyrant loses power once again, in part because his young wife accuses him of refusing to have sex with her. He abstains from sex or from conventional sex because marriage to the woman was due to a necessary political link, and he already had a child he wished to bestow the city to. Regardless, despite losing the prior political connections, he manages to take control of the city for a third time. This time he applies force, military action. Herodotus then does as before, but now regarding Sparta. Specifically, with how the city came to have its system of laws and the situation it found itself in when Croesus allied with them in preparation with the war against the Persians. To make a long story short, the Spartans, in desperation and difficulty, gave Lycurgus power to reform the whole system of life. The present historian says that this happened during a war against Tegea. Then, believe it or not, the remains, the bones, of none other than Orestes are involved. This is the hero who killed his own mother as described by the playwright Aeschylus, whose plays you may also learn about on this channel. For now, never mind the details about that. As previously mentioned, Croesus allies with the Spartans, but invades Persia without asking them for assistance. The historian describes the whole campaign which, of course, Croesus loses against the Persian king, Cyrus. As the former is retreating, he sends for the Spartans, but as these are caught in a conflict of their own, by the time the Spartans are ready to send support, Medea, the Lydian capital, had fallen and Croesus was already captured. As to me, the most interesting portion of Croesus' story is how he learned Solon's lesson. Let me mention that a certain prophetess had divined that Croesus should not wish for his yet living son to regain his wit, in particular his ability to speak, as that would be a day of woe. It happened that the son who never spoke shouted out when enemy soldiers were about to kill his father. This let them know that their victim was the enemy king and, instead of quickly murdering him, they captured him to be burned alive. Yet, Croesus did not die, rather, Herodotus relates.
As he stood upon the pyre there came, although he was in such evil case, a memory of the saying of Solon, how he had said with divine inspiration that no one of the living might be called happy.
As a result, the usurped king shouted out Solon's name repeatedly, which made Cyrus, his captor, inquire as to whom he was naming. The story, as if it were a legend, goes that Croesus tells Cyrus Solon's message and Cyrus, in turn, changes his attitude or intentions. Herodotus says that the Persian
changed his purpose and considered that he himself also was but a man, and that he was delivering another man, who had been not inferior to himself in felicity, alive to the fire.
To make matters more outstanding, it happens that they cannot extinguish the already burning fire. Croesus begins to roast. Yet, the man begs Apollo, the god whose oracle misled him into the war and to whom he had made so many offerings in the past, and no sooner was the prayer said that the weather changed, and fire-extinguishing rain began to fall. Thus Cyrus, by Croesus' willingness, made the now conquered king into his royal advisor, a soon-to-be most useful of royal advisors, like I said, as if it were a legend. In the process, when explaining his own folly for ever going to war, Croesus is quoted as saying,
"In peace the sons bury their fathers, but in war the fathers bury their sons."
A most harrowing aphorism. As for Apollo, the historian clarifies that Croesus reproached to the oracle of Delphi, and that this one explained to him his folly and how in the end the god did save him thus. The god is not only real, but wise and just. If you wish to know how Cyrus and the Persian Empire came about, if you wish to know what is going to happen to Croesus now that he is a captive, if you wish to know how Greece managed to stop the Persian invasion, watch the next videos. Now, to pique your curiosity, to motivate you to watch the last video of the series, I gift you a teaser sample of one of the many aphorisms I crafted as I read this work.
Frustrated by their frequent mispredictions of the future, scientists overestimate their capacity to predict the past.
If you enjoy or gain from my aphorisms, know that I have thousands. I will be writing books with short thematic essays composed out of aphorisms. These essays are profound and intriguing yet easy to read. For very cheap copies, look up Protagoras Pause in the Amazon website. I repeat, Protagoras Pause, that's my name.